Muted.
Hello and welcome to Ethical Corporation's webinar on Moving Beyond Audits, Practical Ways to Build Trust and Long-Term Relationships with Your Suppliers in Asia. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll be discussing the extent to which two top companies, Ricoh Asia Pacific and ICTI Care Foundation, are developing effective strategies and programs to achieve responsible procurement in their global value chains. My name is Elena Yumasheva and I represent Ethical Corporation. I look after our Asian work and I also would be your moderator for this discussion. So with us today we have Masayo Hada, Manager Regional Environmental Management Group at Ricoh Asia Pacific, and Mark Robertson, Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations at ICTI Care Foundation. And a bit of an announcement from my side. We were supposed to be joined by Gordon Bedford, Global Director of Environment, Health and Safety at Mattel. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to do it for some personal emergency reasons. So we would keep our conversation slightly shorter than we're supposed to, and it would take around 30 to 45 minutes. I still hope this would be a valuable event for you. So thank you all for joining the webinar. So to give you an understanding of today's structure, there are no slides. It's just a pure discussion. The webinar would be focused discussion with the speakers trying to bring out as much of their expertise and knowledge from the backgrounds and the work they've done. Each speaker would be focusing on different areas of management and would be moving from one speaker to another. This means if you have any questions coming up whilst one is presenting, please enter them in a chat box. You would see it on your screens on the right-hand side. That's the one that is using the webinar software. Or you can also tweet them by using hashtag RBSAsia in one word. There would be also polling questions in the webinar, which we'll put to you, the audience, and our speakers will then bring their perspectives and responses on the results of the questions. Please note that the answers you give would be strictly confidential, so please do share your genuine views. And the latter half would involve a Q&A with the audience, where you again could actively participate and bring some of your questions to the speakers. So before we begin, I would also like to emphasize that this is an interactive discussion, and please post your questions on the chat box on the right-hand side using the webinar software. So we shall begin the discussion now, finally. And so to understand where we are with the audience and what kind of challenges you're facing right now, we'd start with our first poll question to the listener. So you should be able to see it now on your screen. The question is, in your personal opinion, do you think your current approach to supplier audit is comprehensive enough? So you have three options. You have yes, no, or don't know. Pretty straightforward. And I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to answer the question. Please, this is on the webinar software we're using. You can just choose the the answer you like, you think is most appropriate to you. So it's 3, 2, 1, and we're wrapping up. Right, interesting. So we got 57% of the audience saying that they don't think the current approach to supplier audit is comprehensive enough. Then 24% don't really know what's happening there, I suppose. And 18%, the minority, said yes, they're actually quite confident that the supplier audit is comprehensive and fulfilling. And before the speakers, I'm going to give a word to you. I would also like to introduce the second question, just to get a bigger picture, and then we'll have a discussion with you. So the second question is, what are the key challenges in setting up a comprehensive approach to understanding supplier performance? So we spoke about whether you feel comfortable with supplier audit program. Now we talk about whether what kind of challenges you're facing in this space. Again, you see the answers on your screen. So first option is keeping up with the new risks. Second, detecting social and environmental problems. Third, reporting and correcting environmental and labor issues, maybe social issues. And last one, other. So if you think this is something else, could you please either enter your answer on the chat box again, or you can tweet it by using the hashtag RBSAsia. So a few more seconds to go. Still there is a competition, and giving you 3, 4, 1, and we're wrapping up. So answers. The leading one is reporting and correcting environmental and labor problems. That seems to be the biggest challenge in setting up a comprehensive approach to understanding supplier performance. A second one, which is actually almost on the same level with the third one, is detecting social and environmental problems, and keeping up with the new risks seems to be a big issue. So those 8% who answered other would highly appreciate your challenges you're facing in the space. So please tweet them or enter in the chat box. Excellent. I think that's a good start. So now we have an understanding of what's happening with our audience and whether they feel comfortable with these kind of issues. So I would like to introduce our speakers. Shall we start with Mark, who is the Director of Communications at Stakeholder Relations at ICTI Care Foundation. So Mark, would be great if you could give us a quick overview of your organization and then just share your thoughts on what kind of challenges you're facing in this space and why do you think these are the biggest ones?
Sure. Thanks, Alina, and thanks for the invitation to speak today, and hello to everybody on the call. So I'm Mark Robertson. I'm Director of Stakeholder Relations and Communications at ICTI Care. For those of you that don't know us, the ICTI Care Foundation is an independent, not-for-profit ethical supply chain program for the global toy and entertainment industry. So we were established in 2004 with the main aim really of protecting the lives of workers and improving labour standards in the global toy industry supply chain. Our main offices are in Hong Kong and Shenzhen in China, but we also have offices in the States and also in Europe as well. And basically, we provide a range of comprehensive and specialised audits for the toy and entertainment industry. We also have a robust ethical toy manufacturer certification scheme. We run a capability building program and training programs for toy manufacturers, as well as education and peer-to-peer learning programs. Increasingly as well, we're also conducting special investigations into different supply chain challenges, mainly in China, and these are about trying to get to the bottom of different issues that exist within the kind of toy industry supply chain. Globally, we now work with over 1,200 toy brands and retailers who use the ICTI Care Foundation program to monitor, and fix social sustainability issues in the supply chain and improve standards. And our toy manufacturer certification scheme now covers over 1,100 toy factories located in 12 countries. So whilst we're focused mainly in China, we're increasingly global in our outlook as brands and retailers seek to diversify their supply chain. In addition to all of that, we also run a free confidential helpline for workers in China. So this helpline is widely publicized within factories across China, and over the last 5 years, it's widely used. So the helplines now receive over 10,000 calls, supporting an average of 2,000 workers a year. And across our program, we reckon we now represent around about 750,000 workers in China. So quite a substantial chunk of the workforce is covered. So that's our organisation. I think returning to the polls and the initial question focused on where people really are in terms of their programs, I think it's not surprising that that a lot of people aren't confident that they're seeing the full picture. And I think that's a reflection of several things. I think a lot of people, for a lot of people, audit is still forms the kind of core part of their responsible sourcing programs, and I think that's great. I think certainly for a lot of people who are new to the space, audit and certification is a good starting point, and it's certainly a core part of the toolbox, if you like, for responsible sourcing. But we would say it's really only the beginning of the responsible sourcing journey, and that's why today's call, I think, is a good focus, because alongside audit and certification, it's important also to look at other ways to engage with your suppliers and really build their capability and capacity. And I think also really it's in terms of the key challenges, certainly in terms of detecting issues, audit will get you so far, but in terms of actually reporting on issues and developing corrective actions to address them, that's really where capability programs, capability building programs and training and capacity building really does come in. So I think it's an interesting assessment of where people are at, and really reflection of largely where certainly our industry is at in terms of its initial focus on audits and now looking more at capability building.
Excellent, thank you, Mark. So just to summarize, would you say then the audit is still a good way to move forward to detect the issues, or don't you think it gives a full picture? You need some extra tools for it.
I think it's crucial, and I think audits I don't think it's one or the other. I think audits have will always have a role to play in any responsible sourcing program, not only in terms of understanding where suppliers are at, but also in terms of checking the effectiveness of your capability building program. So in that sense, I think it's a virtuous cycle. So you need audits when you first go into a supplier or a factory to understand where standards are at. But as you seek to engage with that supplier and build a relationship with them and work to improve standards, you obviously need to check as well that those actions are being effective. So I'm certainly not discounting the role of audits, but I think it's a timely discussion to look at ways you can start to move beyond that process to start to shift the needle on different challenges, if you like.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Masaya, over to you. Would be great to hear, obviously, your perspective on the poll questions and the results of it, whether you believe in audit and think this is enough, or you feel that you need to do more to actually understand and get a full picture of your supplier performance, and secondary, what kind of biggest challenges you're facing in the space. And obviously, it would be good to get a full overview of the company, just to our listeners, so they can understand what is material to Rico Asia Pacific, and what kind of issues you're focusing on. So over to you, please.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Masayo. I'm in Singapore, and it's hot here. I'm in charge of the regional environmental management group, looking after the Asia Pacific and mainland China environmental sustainability operations for Rico, and we're looking after about 11 countries directly from this Singapore regional HQ office. And for Rico, our portfolio ranges from the products ranging office imaging equipment like for multifunction device, printers, or production printers, or digital cameras, or IT solutions. So these are the main items that we deal. And we, as a group, Rico Group, we have 21 major production bases across Japan, America, Europe, and Asia Pac, and China. And for our supply chain system, we integrate the product planning, development, design, technology, and information system to encompass all our business functions, and it coordinates all major regions and the departments to enable the group-wide improvements. So for us, our supply chain is handling actually an ever-growing number of products as Rico expands into the new territories and emerging markets. Even as our business grows, however, we are limiting the size of our inventory to make the procurement and management system more efficient. And our goal is to have a supply chain nimble enough to increase production flexibility while meeting the customer requirements precisely.
All right, excellent, Masaya. And so thank you very much for sharing your perspective to sustainability and the way the operations are done. When it comes to actually working with suppliers, so do you feel that auditing, obviously this is not exactly your remit, but from your perspective, do you think auditing is something that is able to give you a full indication on on supplier performance, and whether you're happy with it or you feel that there are other tools that need to be used in order to understand and get a full picture?
In terms of the Rico suppliers, the suppliers are expected to comply with the Rico Group Supplier Code of Conduct. We have a guideline and guidebooks, and this contains the rules related to the environmental conservation and the human rights, such as the prohibition of the child labor. And this Supplier Code of Conduct guidebook is distributed to all our suppliers. And back in 2009, we invited all major suppliers to a meeting at which they're represented to the Rico Group CSR activities. And our aim was to have them to share our values by raising their awareness of the importance of CSR and the Code of Conduct. And also in 2009, we introduced a CSR self-assessment system that helps suppliers implement PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle by themselves. And this system was initially rolled out in Japan, but it was actually being gradually expanded to other countries. And company activities that require improvement are identified by these assessments, then which results fed back to the suppliers together with the advice and the support on the way to meet the society needs and expectations. So this system, self-assessment system, has been used by local suppliers in China since 2010, and we started introducing to Thailand in 2013. So definitely support these suppliers, they get back to us and giving us the positive feedback.
Thank you very much, Masaya. You certainly touched on our next question, which is around what kind of tools and approaches to assess data beyond auditing do you have and think work best for you. So now we know that in Rico, Asia Pacific, you use sort of supplier self-assessment approach, and every supplier is expected to comply with the code of conduct. So thank you very much for touching upon that. Mark, I would love to hear your thoughts. You obviously mentioned briefly at the beginning that there are a lot of capacity building activities taking place, which you think is really important to complement and really develop and introduce the changes of supplier performance. Perhaps you could expand a bit more on that and what kind of approaches you think work best for you and for the toy industry.
Absolutely, sure. Well, firstly, just more with data in mind, obviously the audit and certification aspects of our global program that we have with the toy industry are crucial, and they provide a host of important information that users of our program use to manage risk and improve standards. But again, with data in mind, there are other ways in which, as we're kind of building out our program, we're kind of sourcing other data to help build our understanding of where suppliers are at on different issues in the toy industry. So at the beginning, I mentioned our helpline. So this is a free worker helpline that really we set up to support workers in the toy industry supply chain. So the idea is that they can ring the helpline and get access-free, confidential information on their roles and responsibilities, so what their rights are under local label, all that kind of stuff. But they can also use it to flag areas of specific concern. So there might be very serious concerns or more kind of general issues that they're kind of coming across in their day-to-day work. Interestingly as well, the helpline also is increasingly used by factory management in China. So they're also calling it to gain a deeper understanding of what workers are, the challenges that workers are facing in their factories as well. So we're finding that the helpline kind of offers dual benefit in that respect. Now, of course, it's confidential. So if a factory calls the helpline, then they'll be getting top-level information as to the kind of issues which have been flagged in the industry and also perhaps at their site. So all of that means that we're not only providing quite a useful resource for factory workers in China, and actually, interestingly, workers in other sectors, not just the toy industry, are starting to use it. But it means that we're kind of collecting a lot of useful data and insight that's helping us to build our understanding of what issues exist in China and what, how our program needs to develop to tackle those. So certainly, in terms of the kind of top issues that workers raise, it's often around, seeking a greater understanding of things like pay and their working hours, and also their general rights under Chinese labour law. So that's told us that we need to do a better job of educating workers about their kind of rights and responsibilities as well under Chinese law. But it brings in all sorts of other data that we're really using now to kind of build out our program as we look to look at new ways of supporting factories in China. So the helpline brings in lots of interesting data. Also, in terms of, we're also sharpening our focus on worker voice. So later on this year, we're going to be trialing new worker voice technologies, such as mobile phone surveys and using technologies such as WeChat. And basically, they can facilitate more anonymous data collection and feedback from factory workers, and basically giving brands that use the ICTI Care program greater visibility of the true working conditions in their factories. So we already look at this as part of our standard auditing and certification program through on-site interviews with workers. But what we're trying to do is look at using new technologies to go a bit further. And of course, that will, from a data perspective, that will give us an extra insight into where factories are at. So we'll be able to compare that level of data from mobile phone surveys, for example, with audit data to see how they line up. In terms of other, so we also look at use factory surveys. So each year we conduct factory surveys in China amongst all the factories in our program to better understand the issues which factories face within their businesses, but also to gain, again, their feedback around which the kind of key issues they face in their businesses, so we can develop our program appropriately. And also we're looking a lot more at benchmarking data. So what can we learn from other sectors and industries that are working in the countries where we're present? So what's the electronics industry doing, and what might we learn from that? What key issues exist in apparel? How might we learn from that? And again, by drawing those levels of pulling in that data externally, we're able to see, broadly speaking, where our industry's at. So we're able to look, for example, on the issue of working hours and see that in the toy and entertainment industry, suppliers actually are slightly ahead of other sectors in terms of minimizing working hours for workers. But on other issues like health and safety, for example, we've got a fair bit to go. So benchmarking data, I think, is really useful because I think it really helps you understand, where you're at and what you can learn as well. Which is also points to the importance of collaboration in supply chain. So in terms of the capability work that we're doing, we're seeing greater benefit the more that we're able to bring buyers and retailers together at the top of the supply chain to start to look at working together to address issues, but also bring factories and suppliers together within the supply chain itself, so that they can start to learn from each other and really kind of understand and see how their peers are adopting best practice. So one of the another area of focus for us this year will be increasing the amount of workshops that we run in China to bring factories together. But we're also going to be piloting an ethical manufacturing forum in China, in Shenzhen, which will bring together different factories in our program, initially on a pilot basis. But the idea is that factories will come together and identify common solutions to common issues, but we'll also within the meetings be inviting buyers and retailers to those forums as well. So the idea is it's a kind of an open forum discussion to explore some of the challenges which we're all working towards, and ideally find common solutions to them, because we really find that the kind of things that really inspire factories to drive improvements in their businesses are collaboration, but also I think learning more about best practice and seeing the business benefits of all of this as well.
Great, thank you, Mark. Just a very quick question on a technical aspect. So all these helpline and WeChat, these kind of technologies that you use or surveying to understand the real worker voice. So are they free to use? Are they sort of easy to use? How does it operate just on a technical level?
Well, the helpline we run ourselves in partnership with a provider based in China. I think an organisation called Little Bird. So they're an organisation on the ground that runs the helpline with us. The worker voice technology is something we're looking to roll out this year. So we've not actually started that yet, but we're looking to partner with an external organisation called Good World Solutions. So we're still in the kind of embryonic stages of all of that. But the idea is that once we have that data on stream, though, we'll be able to make the comparisons I was talking about and look at where the gaps are between the audit data that we collect and whether or not there's, the worker voice technology will give us a different perspective.
And actually, there is one more question we just saw John Sedman asking it. So that's a question for you. She asks if it's easy to find the benchmarking data for other industries you have just mentioned, and if there is any central place where they can find it and where it's available.
Sure. So we as part of our program, we work with 7 different large independent audit firms who help us conduct the audit and certification part of the ICTI Care process. So through that, through those relationships, we're able to access data from them directly, which enables us to conduct these benchmarks. In terms of publicly available information, I think that's something that we would like to later this year start to publish our own briefings or white papers that will kind of make some of that data available in the public domain. So I can see there's a real benefit to having more information available to enable people to compare industries on a sector-by-sector basis. So the benchmarking data we're using comes from the audit firms we're working with, because obviously they're working across multiple sectors. But I think in terms of making that publicly available, that's something I'd like to look at doing later this year.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Messiah, I was just holding off a bit. There were a few questions for you, which I would like to use now from the audience. So first one was around monitoring your supplier if they actually follow the code of conduct. So what kind of practices and tools do you have in place in order to ensure that the suppliers actually follow the code of conduct?
Okay, for Rico, or even for the company's manufacturer, it's very important to share the information with the suppliers. So we find it's very important to have an established communication infrastructure with the suppliers. So for Rico in 2001, we launched the network called Lavender Net. And this network is for the sharing information on production and the environmental impact caused by the raw materials and parts. And this Lavender Net was expanded in 2005 to include the overseas vendors. This network actually maintained jointly with our suppliers, and this has streamlined the process of confirming the compliance of purchase orders, for instance, with the Rico standard. It took, let's say, 2 to 3 days, and just now shortened to just a half day. So using of this platform would actually give a lot more, strengthen the communication with the suppliers. So this is one thing that we find it's very important to have with suppliers.
Right, okay. And so there was another question. I suppose it might be the same sort of approach. The question was, how's the supplier self-assessment approach is managed? So is it the same vendor system that you have you're using for self-assessment as well?
For the suppliers, we have a list of suppliers, and of course for we used to have about 35,000 parts and goods, or even the raw items. So of course you can imagine of how many suppliers we were dealing with. And actually what we have done at the procurement together with the designing of the product is that we basically slim down the numbers, which it's easier for us to deal with. So now we are, let's say we use normally about 3,000 parts or materials to deal with, so that it's easier for us to maintain the checking of all the suppliers globally.
All right. Thank you very much, Messiah. We are moving on to the next question, and I suppose you already started expanding on it slightly. So you mentioned the system where you have the vendors working together and benchmarking against each other. Touching upon supplier facilitation of knowledge exchange and expertise sharing of your supplier base, could you tell us more what kind of programs you have in place here, and what kind of approaches you think work best to ensure that knowledge exchange and expertise sharing?
Okay, for Rico, as part of the supply chain management, collection and recycling is very much part of the supply chain management. So for us, the product collection, or so-called the reverse logistics, is very much important. So for our system, integrates both the flow that deliver the products to our customers, and another flows that to collect used products. And This in the reverse logistics of our collection process. The information stored in the product barcode is read into the product recycling database that complies the numbers and the ratio of the recovered products and parts. So this data is then used to develop plans for the sales of the recycled products or reuse of the parts. So to think of the close the loop or the circular economy concept, it's very much should be inside the part of the supplier value chain management.
Excellent. So this is a very much seamless support that you provide to your customers, and the sort of product circularity thinking is very much integrated at the production level already.
That's right. Yes, this is actually a global concept. So we are learning these activity or initiatives in Asia, but the same thing in Europe or America or the other part of the world.
Great. Thank you very much, Masaya. I would just like to emphasize to our audience once again that please tweet your questions by using the hashtag RBS Asia, or you can answer them in the chat box. So we're picking them up and asking our speakers to answer them. Going back to our discussion, Mark, I would like to ask you about how do you work with suppliers to ensure that change, and by providing the supplier support. You did mention obviously some capacity building programs and hearing the worker voice. So what kind of other activities you have as a second stage when you come to the introducing some changes in the factories management level?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, firstly, really, I would acknowledge that the importance of supplier support. I mean, that's certainly something that we see as key. And with the ultimate goal of improving the lives of workers in mind, supporting workers, encourage them to make changes and adopt practices that can deliver an immediate impact is important. Because I think there's, again, with China in mind, there's the kind of large problems we're all working towards, or challenges, I should say. So things like reducing working hours, for example, or the wages issue are certainly large challenges that affect any sector. So I think in terms of supporting suppliers, it's a combination really of looking at what they need to tackle the larger challenges, but also looking to see what other quick wins exist really to deliver improvements right now for workers. And in our experience, there's even just thinking about the last year, there's all sorts of examples of ways in which you can make a change that might appear to be quite small in a factory, but actually in terms of worker satisfaction can make a big difference. So they can range from relatively minor issues, such as enabling workers, for example, to vote on their lunch options in factories, and we've seen those kind of changes creating a spike in levels of satisfaction, through to other issues which are bigger, but actually offer opportunities to kind of address or make a difference right away. So a key issue that we're starting to look at in our program is the issue of left-at-home children in China. So as a lot of people on the call may know, the mass movement of workers in China, particularly from rural communities in the north down to the industrial south around Shenzhen, has meant that there's a lot of children who are left at home as their parents kind of migrate to find work, and they're left at home to be looked after often by their grandparents actually, in rural communities. So that means for workers in factories in China, that creates real challenges for them as parents, and it's one of the key issues of concern for workers in that region. So what we're looking at, we don't have all the answers on this, but what we're looking at really is how can we better support workers in factories who are working remotely from their children. So one example is we're again partnering with a local NGO to look at piloting training and workshops for around parenting skills for workers in factories, and really they're focused on helping parents to kind of develop better relationships with their children remotely, and building kind of their skills and capacity to do that, how to kind of have better conversations with your children when they're away, how to when you do return home, how to really connect with them. The reason we're looking at this is because it's a huge issue, but also we've seen, again, looking at other work that other sectors are doing, we've seen other pilots deliver a real benefit. And the organisation that we're looking at working with, I think they've done some work with a major beverage company that we're probably all aware of in their supply chain in China, and these parenting workshops have really started to deliver a real benefit to the workers that they're in the factory, and they're very well attended, they're voluntary, but they've been oversubscribed, and they're really the benefits they've delivered are pretty tangible. So I think for us it's a combination of making sure that we're looking at the big issues, but also trying to find other issues that can deliver a more of an immediate benefit, and that's really about helping factories to engage with their workers and actually helping them have a better understanding of what their workers want, and also helping workers perhaps understand a bit more about where factory management are at on different issues as well. So delivering small benefits or small changes in a factory not only benefits the workers that are there, but it creates it creates a happier workforce basically. And the more that employees are satisfied in their jobs, the more that we see benefits in terms of things like reduced turnover rate, which means kind of low cost and training. So again, it's a bit of a virtuous circle, but a kind of a mixture really of the larger issues and some of the other ones as well.
Okay, great. There are a few questions which I still want to introduce to our conversation from the audience. So one which I think is really interesting, maybe it appeals to me very much because I seem to be quite technical and always looking for KPIs and measurement indicators. So a question to you, Mark, how do you monitor the impact of the changes you propose and implement, and what kind of KPIs you have that show that these changes have a positive impact?
Sure. I think the main way is certainly still through auditing. So as I said, auditing, we audit when a factory first applies to join our program, we'll go in there and audit it to see where it's at, and then develop an action plan with that factory to improve standards. And then once those standards have been met, the factory then joins the program. But it doesn't stop there. So we continually monitor and evaluate that factory's performance. And as we look to kind of inject more capability building work in our program, I think auditing really will still plays a critical role in seeing how effective that is. So as we do more work to build employee satisfaction and worker satisfaction, then we'll use and report on the kind of worker voice work that we're doing. So certainly auditing. But also, I think other KPIs we're looking at is, the number of factories that are participating in our capability programs, the number of factories that participate in our training and workshops, for example. And I think once we've piloted our ethical supplier forum, we'll look to roll that out and then use surveys really to see how much benefit factories are deriving from the work we're doing as well. Also, just quickly, the helpline, I think, as I mentioned earlier, gives us some really useful data to see, hear directly from workers as to where they're at on these kind of issues, and whether or not the kind of work we're doing is making an impact for them directly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. There are more questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to pick them up anymore because the time is running out. Last question, really. We seem to be talking a lot about UK Slavery Act now, and Mark, so how do you think this might affect the way the audit and just general sort of checkups of supplier performance is happening? how could it impact big companies around the world, and just from your perspective?
Well, I think it's going to change auditing radically, because most programs, and I was included, are already looking at modern-day slavery, and really should have been for some time now. So it's not going to change the way we do audits. I don't think it will actually change necessarily the way other programs do audits. But what I think it is going to do is bring a lot more, hopefully anyway, a lot more companies to the table on supply chain responsibility generally. So the Act creates a responsibility for any company with a turnover of more than 36 million, either based in the UK or that supplies to the UK, to report on what they're doing on modern-day slavery. And you can't really report on that unless you have transparency in your supply chain and you have a program to tackle those kind of issues. So I think auditing is already looking at the issue, but I think the changes that we'll see are that a lot more. It's going to hopefully force a lot more companies now to take a much deeper look at all the different tiers in the supply chain, to make sure that they have the right policies and management systems in place to tackle the issue. Initially, the Act just requires companies to disclose what they're doing. So that could be just a statement saying we're not doing anything, but hopefully it will be a statement saying we're doing a lot more than that. But I think as we see more and more companies begin to report on the issue, we'll start to get a better sense of what good practice looks like at the top of the supply chain. I should just add quickly, we recently wrote a blog that looks at some of these issues in a bit more detail, which is available on our website. So if you go to icti-care.org, we've kind of listed out some of the challenges and details of the Act, but we've also got a link to some of the disclosure statements which companies are now producing on modern-day slavery.
Thank you, Mark. Masayo, obviously I don't know if this is something really applicable to Rico, but so is there any changes that you think UK Slavery Act might introduce to the way supply audits or maybe just general supply engagement work is taking place right now at Rico?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So whether UK Slavery Act would impact the ways supplier audits are taking place at Rico, but it might not be something that would be applicable to you.
Okay, our production lines, I'm looking after checking, communicating with China side and Thailand. So it's not directly to that extent. And what we are trying to do is that to go and to communicate as much as possible and then help them as a partnership. So we try to create the value for both and to have a win-win situation for both parties. So it is still progressing. We still have areas of improvement. So I think it is just keep giving a communication and try our best to this area, because the Asia has a lot of the production sites from all over the world. So the supplier, the bottom, the production site is actually facing a lot of difficulties these days.
All right, thank you. And just to summarize, what would you recommend, maybe top 3 things to our listeners, how to ensure that you have a full control and understanding of your supply chain and supplier base, maybe top 3 tips from you on how to achieve that?
For the supply chain management, in our company, we start from procurement, production, sales service, logistics, and collection and recycling. So this is not just one way, and it has to be close the loop. So we, as a company, we have to think of how we can utilize our material at the end of the life to come back to life to our production line. So that's how we try to have a new business models with the new product lines. So that's how actually we are still learning and doing our process in Asia.
Excellent, excellent. So having a full product cycle in mind when working with your suppliers. Thank you very much, Masaya. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, our listeners. It's been an excellent discussion, and I'm afraid we have run out of time. Everyone who signed up for the webinar will receive a recording of today's webinar. If your questions were not answered, you can still raise them with us, and we'd be happy to answer them. The webinar ran as part of our knowledge exchange and expertise sharing of the Responsible Business Summit Asia, taking place in Singapore this May, 17th and 18th of May. The details of the event you can see on the screen now. There would be other 30+ speakers from procurement, supply chain, sustainability background, as well as top managers. So please join us at the event, and thank you very much everyone for your time and attention. We speak soon. Goodbye.